Hello everyone, good morning. So my name is Abhiram and I have my teammates Nidhi and Indu on the call with me as well. And we are here to present our data mining project on a Spotify song recommendation based on users' emotion. So we'll start off by walking through what exactly the problem statement looks like, and we'll also do a walkthrough of the two separate processes for emotion detection as well as Spotify recommendation. We'll also look at how we can combine these two steps and finally present you with the results and potential future work as well. So going over what exactly the problem we are trying to tackle is, we want to figure out how we can use a multi-model database which contains emotional speech to figure out a person's emotion, based on which we can recommend songs to them as well through Spotify. Some of the existing research that is part of this project is for the emotion detection. A lot of papers build CNN from scratch. And they also use some of the most advanced concepts like LSTM as well. A lot of focus is on facial emotion recognition rather than audio detection as well. So some of the existing research for Spotify would include using advanced concepts like collaborative and content-based filtering using advanced deep learning techniques. A lot of clustering methodologies also take place to cluster songs based on artist, genre, etc. So walking through the emotion detection process, the dataset that we use is called the RAFTIS dataset, which consists of about 1,440 files of audio recordings of 24 professional American actors. This is done in a neutral North American accent. It primarily consists of 8 different emotions: angry, calm, disgust, fearful, happy, neutral, sad, and surprise. So what we do as part of this entire process is we want to take the raw data, then we attempt to transform it. Example, we try to add noise to it, but we try to augment the data. So what we do after the augmentation process is we use something called a MEL spectrogram, where we want to convert our audio data into an image. So as part of this process, we also have a fast Fourier transform happening, and the output of this process is seen on the right-hand side, which is eventually an image. The reason we are doing an image is because we want to run a deep learning model based on image recognition. So we attempt to do a VGG16 model in ensemble with a random forest classifier. This is purely because of the fact we do not have enough training data to train a VGG16 by itself. So what we attempt to do, as seen on the right-hand side, is that once we define the model, we extract the trainable layer. We extract the features from the VGC16 model and use it as an input for a random forest classifier. And using this, we attempt to predict one of these 8 emotions. So the way we test it is we test it using the test data that we have with us. We record our own voices and attempt to predict what kind of emotion we have. So moving on, I'll hand it over to Nidhi for the Spotify walkthrough.
Over to the next slide, Indu. Yeah. So we for the Spotify song recommender system, we collected data from two sources. One was Spotify Web API, from where we collected 800 songs, and the other source was Kaggle data source, from which we collected 20K songs. These songs have 11 audio features, which basically describes the properties, the mood, and the context of the songs. Some of these audio features are energy, danceability, liveliness, loudness, etc. Over to next slide. So here we look at how we have collected the data, how we have done the pre-processing, and then built the model. So after collecting the data from Spotify Web API and Kaggle dataset, we made a master dataset which consisted of 27 features. Once we had our master dataset, we basically did data pre-processing on that. As a part of our data pre-processing, we first extracted the track URL, which was basically the identifier for our dataset, and then we cleaned the dataset by removing the null values and the duplicate records. Once the data cleaning was done, we moved ahead with exploratory data analysis, where we actually looked at the distribution of the features, and then we decided to move ahead with only audio features, and we dropped features which was related to album and artist. So we finally had our audio features. Once the feature selection was completed, we scaled the data for our modeling step. After the data pre-processing step, we were left with 13 features. The reason we did not do any kind of dimensionality reduction here, because all these 13 features were important from our modeling perspective, and hence we moved ahead with 13 features, which was an input to our song recommender system. Over to next slide. So our Spotify song recommender system clustered the songs based on K-means clustering technique. The reason why we moved ahead with K-means clustering technique was because it gave us better performance than other clustering techniques like hierarchical clustering and DB scan. So for K-means clustering technique, we had to obtain the optimal K. We utilized the elbow method to come up with an optimal K. At K equal to 5, we were able to find a balance between WCSS and the number of clusters to be minimum. Hence, we took 5 clusters and we were able to cluster the songs into 5 clusters. Once the clustering step was done, we mapped each of these clusters to 8 emotions based on the audio features and the distribution of these features. Then we mapped these 5 clusters to 8 emotions. And in the next part, over to the next slide. In the next part, we'll talk about how we have combined the emotion detection with Spotify recommendation. Over to the Indu for this.
Now let's look at how we are combining both the emotion detection and song recommendation pipeline. Looking at the emotion detection pipeline, we have the VGG16 from which we collect the features. And then it's passed down to the random forest classifier, where we classify the audio into one of the 8 emotions. Now, coming to the second part, where we have the song recommendation pipeline, we have the Spotify dataset from which we extract the audio features and then pass it through a K-means clustering algorithm, where we have the number of clusters to be 5. Once we have these clusters ready, we then pass the emotion we detected as an input to the song recommendation system, okay? Where the emotion will be mapped to a cluster and 5 songs will be recommended from the cluster randomly. We also tested our model with an unseen audio of one of our teammates, and our model was able to predict the emotion correctly and recommended songs suitable for the emotion. Now, moving on, we saw that the model performed well, but let's look at some numbers. For the ensemble model that we use for the emotion detection piece, we can see that on an average, the recall is around 88% for all the 8 emotions. So this result shows the individual results for each emotion and the average for every metric that we have chosen. And the recall seems to be around 88% on average. So which was good enough for us to proceed further. For the song recommendation piece, if you can see, after the K-means clustering, these are the 5 clusters that we got. And there are some emotions, like a couple of emotions are mapped to the same cluster, like in the case of happy and calm, sad and fearful, angry and disgust are all combined together and mapped to a single cluster. Here we are also presented a sample snapshot of how our recommendation would look like. So this was for emotion happy. Let's look at some of the challenges and future work that we had in our project. So the first thing was the lack of GPUs led to us not experimenting more with the deep learning models. And in the emotion detection piece, we know that we had a lot of deep learning models to train, and without enough GPUs, it was not possible for us to do a lot of experimentation. And then with respect to the fetching the data, like web API, we used the Spotify web API to fetch our Spotify data set. And due to the rate limit, which was imposed by Spotify internally, we were able to get only around 800 records. And then the final thing was, it was really difficult to visualize the clustering output, as our Spotify data set was a higher dimensional data set. And we also wanted to discuss some future work that we plan to do. So the first one would be to benchmark our VGG with some classifiers which are in the market to do this emotion detection. We wanted to compare our results, how the RF classifier is going to perform with respect to other classifiers which are in the market. And the second thing would be, as we mentioned earlier in our challenges, we wanted to overcome this challenge by leveraging the GPUs that may be available to us from Boulder, from CU Boulder, to do a lot of experimentation with different deep learning models. Furthermore, for the Spotify song recommendation, we also want to use the content and context-based filtering. Basically, want to use the lyrics and song titles, then do the recommendation instead of just using the audio features. So yeah, here are some of the references that we used for both the Spotify song recommendation and emotion detection. Thank you and hope you liked the presentation.